Welcome back to the deep dive. I want you to take a second right now, wherever you are.
Okay.
Just look around you. Look at the walls, look at the floor, maybe the ceiling.
Right. The room you're in.
Exactly. Because we're going to be talking about the home today.
Yeah.
And it feels like, the most familiar subject in the world.
Of course. It's where you sleep, where you eat. It's the primary setting of the human experience. The statistics on this are pretty staggering. We spend about 65% of our entire lives inside our homes.
65%. When you put a number on it like that, it's a massive chunk of our existence.
It's most of it.
But the whole premise of our deep dive today is that despite spending the majority of our time there, the home is actually, it's the thing we understand the least.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to argue that the modern home is really defined by two huge, distinct invisibilities.
It's a tale of two ghosts, really. It's a great way to put it.
Oh, I like that.
On one side, you have the invisible threats that are literally inside the physical materials of your house.
Inside the walls.
Right. The chemistry, the off-gassing, the microscopic interactions happening in your living room that you just never see.
Sure.
That's the biological reality of the house.
And then on the other side, you have the invisible forces controlling those walls.
The money.
The money, the financial structures, the ownership shifts, the global capital flows that decide who actually holds the deed. That's the economic reality of the house.
Exactly. So we're looking at the house as a physical shell, and then we're looking at it as a financial asset.
Mm-hmm.
And what we found when we dug into these sources is, well, it's pretty startling in both cases.
To help us navigate all this, we've pulled two very different, very dense sources from the stack today.
Yeah, they come at it from completely different angles.
The first is a really practical manual. It's titled A Household Guide to Healthy, Affordable Building Materials.
Okay.
Think of this as a field guide to the toxicity of the modern built environment. It's the what.
And the second source is a very heavy economic analysis called Investors in Housing Markets in Las Vegas, a case study. And this document tracks how the housing crash of 2008 basically turned Las Vegas into a petri dish for a new type of homeowner.
Or maybe a new type of homeowner who, never actually steps foot in the house.
That's a key distinction, yes.
So our mission today is to give you X-ray vision. That's the goal.
I like it.
By the time we're done, we want you to be able to look at a wall and see the polyvinyl chloride and the formaldehyde, and then look through that wall to see the investor LLCs and the global money movements that might actually own the property.
We're peeling back the paint, and then we are peeling back the mortgage.
Let's start with the physical. Let's start with what we're breathing. The first source, the guide, it introduces a concept that I think is really critical for reframing how we look at everything we buy. It's the life cycle approach.
This is the foundational concept of green building. Most of us, as consumers, we operate in what's called the use phase.
The use phase.
Right. You buy a countertop. You ask yourself, is it pretty? Is it durable? How much does it cost? And that's kind of it.
Yeah.
You only interact with the material while it's installed in your house.
But the life cycle approach basically says you're missing, 80% of the story if you only do that?
At least.
Mm-hmm.
Correct. You have to look at the manufacture phase. Where did the raw materials for this thing come from? How much pollution was released to make it? Who was exposed to that pollution?
Okay. And then the other end of it.
And then you have to look at the demolition phase. What happens when this material is ripped out in 20 years? Does it biodegrade? Does it go to a landfill? Does it turn into, toxic waste?
So a material could be totally inert and safe while it's sitting on my wall.
Perfectly safe to touch.
But if it required releasing a pound of carcinogens into the atmosphere to create it, the life cycle view says that's a toxic material.
Precisely. It expands the definition of cost way beyond just the price tag at the hardware store. It forces you to include the cost to human health and the cost to the environment over the entire lifespan of that product.
And when you apply this life cycle lens, the source identifies a very clear public enemy number one. A material, that is. I mean, it is absolutely everywhere. PVC. Polyvinyl chloride.
The poison plastic. That's what a lot of environmental health advocates call it. And the scale of its use is it's hard to get your head around. The source notes that 75% of all PVC produced globally goes into building materials.
75%. So not toys, not packaging.
No, the vast majority is construction. Pipes, siding, window frames, flooring, gutters. If you are sitting in a house that was built or renovated in the last 30, 40 years, you are almost certainly within reaching distance of PVC right now.
Okay, so let's unpack the chemistry here. Why is it the villain? I mean, I grew up in a house with vinyl siding. It's cheap, you never have to paint it, it seems to last forever. On the surface, it seems like a miracle material.
Well, the problem starts right at the very beginning, in the factory. To make VCC, you need a key ingredient. It's called vinyl chloride monomer, or VCM.
BCM. Got it.
And VCM is, well, it's not just a mild irritant. It is a known human carcinogen.
A known one, so not probable or possible.
No, known is the highest classification. That's from agencies like the EPA, the World Health Organization. It's definitive.
Yeah.
And there is no safe level of exposure to it.
Wow. So the workers making the siding for my childhood house were being exposed to a known carcinogen just as part of the job.
Yes. And the communities around these production facilities often suffer from higher rates of very specific illnesses, like liver cancer and other health issues. But the problem doesn't stop at the factory gate. This is where it gets really, really interesting for the homeowner.
Because PVC in its raw state isn't actually useful, is it?
That's the great irony. Pure PVC is hard, brittle, and very unstable. If you made a pipe out of pure PVC, it would literally shatter if you dropped it. If you try to make flooring out of it, it would just crack under your feet.
So to make it useful, they have to add, what, a cocktail of helpers or something?
That is the perfect word for it, additives. A whole cocktail of them.
This is where we get into the secret sauce of the plastic.
Exactly. So, to make PVC flexible, think about vinyl flooring or a shower curtain or the insulation on electrical wires, they add plasticizers. The main ones are called phthalates.
Phthalates. Phthalats. It's a word we hear a lot, but what are they actually doing in the plastic?
Imagine the PVC molecules are like a dry, stiff sponge. The phthalates are like the water you pour into that sponge to make it squishy and flexible.
Okay.
And 90% of all phthalates produced go into PVC. They're basically inseparable. But here's the mechanism that you really need to understand. The phthalates are not chemically bound to the plastic.
They aren't glued in. They're not part of the structure.
No, they're just mixed in like oil and vinegar in a salad dressing. They're suspended in there, which means that over time, they migrate. They drift out of the plastic. This is called off-gassing or leaching.
So the vinyl floor in my kid's playroom is literally exhaling these chemicals into the air.
Exhaling them into the air, and they settle in the dust. And kids, they crawl on the floor. They put their hands in their mouths. And phthalates are potent. The source links them to a whole host of problems.
Like what?
Reproductive damage, testicular damage, asthma. They're known as endocrine disruptors, which means they fundamentally mess with your body's hormone systems.
And the source mentioned our current exposure levels are already high.
Alarmingly high. The source mentions that the average American's exposure to phthalates is currently nearing the EPA's own maximum acceptable level. We are saturated with this stuff.
And that's just the additive to make it flexible. What about the other side of it? The stuff to make it hard and stable, like for pipes or window frames?
Right. To keep the plastic from breaking down in sunlight or from heat, they use stabilizers. And historically, and still in some cases today, these stabilizers are heavy metals.
What kind of heavy metals?
Lead and cadmium.
Lead? Seriously? We spent decades getting lead out of paint and gasoline. We know what it does.
And yet, for a long time, it was a common stabilizer in vinyl products. Lead is a potent neurotoxin. It lowers IQ, it causes brain damage, especially in children. Cadmium is a known carcinogen.
Are they leaching out too?
It's a slightly different mechanism. They're more locked into the plastic matrix, but as the material ages and becomes brittle, or if it's ever sanded or cut during a renovation, those heavy metals can be released as dust.
There is one other life cycle phase that the source talks about where PVC becomes, truly terrifying, and that's at its end of life, or more specifically, if it burns.
This is the nightmare scenario for firefighters. This is what they are trained to fear. PVC contains chlorine.
Uh-huh.
A lot of it. By weight, it's more than 50% chlorine.
Okay.
When PVC burns, or actually even when it just smolders before it fully ignites, it releases hydrochloric acid gas.
Hydrochloric acid, that sounds immediate and very bad.
It's incredibly corrosive. It burns lung tissue on contact. So if a house full of vinyl siding and vinyl flooring catches fire, the smoke isn't just wood smoke. It is an acidic chemical cloud. It poses a massive, acute threat to anyone breathing it in the family, the firefighters, the neighbors.
And the source mentions one more chemical, dioxin.
Yes. The combustion of chlorinated compounds like PVC creates dioxins. And I want to be clear here, the EPA calls dioxin one of those toxic chemicals known to science.
One of the most toxic ever created.
Right. It's also persistent, which means it doesn't break down in nature. It bioaccumulates, which means it builds up in the food chain. It settles on the grass, a cow eats the grass, the dioxin stores in the cow's fat, and then we eat the burger or drink the milk.
So it's a
It's
cycle.
a global cycle,
Yeah.
and the source is clear. PVC production and incineration is the leading material source of dioxin in the environment.
So even if my house never burns down, the simple fact that we are manufacturing and eventually disposing of this stuff somewhere else means we're all feeding this global dioxin cycle.
That's it exactly. It's a global toxicity tax that we all pay for the convenience of cheap siding.
Okay, let's move from one invisible threat to another sensory experience in the home. The smell, you know that new house smell?
Oh, yeah.
It's so distinct. It smells crisp, manufactured, clean. We've been trained to associate it with something new and valuable.
It's a real triumph of marketing over biology, isn't it? Because that smell, it's largely formaldehyde.
Formaldehyde, which again I associate with high school biology class and, preserving frogs in a jar.
It is a preservative, that's true. But in the building world, its main job is to be a glue. Formaldehyde is the key ingredient in the resins and adhesives used to make composite wood products.
So not solid wood.
No, anything that's wood chips or wood dust glued together. Particle board, plywood, fiberboard, medium density fiberboard, what we call MDF.
Which is everything. The kitchen cabinets, the subflooring, the cheap bookshelf from the big box store.
All of it. If it's not a solid piece of wood, it's basically wood scraps held together with formaldehyde-based glue. And that glue doesn't just stay put. It off-gasses formaldehyde vapor for years after it's manufactured.
And the source classifies this as a probable human carcinogen.
Yes. Not quite at the known level of ECM, but in the next tier down. And it is the primary driver of something called sick building syndrome.
Sick building syndrome.
That's a fascinating phenomena. It's where people experience a whole cluster of symptoms: headaches, respiratory irritation, fatigue, nausea, but only when they're inside a specific building. The symptoms vanish when they leave.
So it's not a virus. It's not an allergy to a specific thing. It's the air.
It's the building itself attacking the occupant, the cumulative load of all these low-level chemical emissions. And the source highlights a really tragic equity issue here when it comes to mobile homes.
Right. Tell us about that connection. I thought that was really important.
Mobile homes, or what we now call manufactured housing, they have to be built to be lightweight and affordable. So they utilize a very, very high percentage of composite wood products.
More than a traditional house.
Way more. You have thin wall paneling, built-in cabinets, subfloors, all made of particle board or MDF. And at the same time, these homes have a much smaller interior volume of air.
So the concentration of the chemical just spikes.
Exactly. The ratio of formaldehyde-emitting surface area to the total air volume is extremely high. So what happens is the people living in the most affordable housing sector are often subjected to the highest and most dangerous chemical loads.
That's a really sobering thought. There's one more physical threat I want to cover before we move on to solutions, because I think it affects a lot of people who have, a deck or a backyard playground. Pressure-treated wood.
The old green lumber, yep.
Yeah, I remember this so vividly from when I was a kid. The wood for decks always had this greenish tint to it. We called it woolmanized wood. I think that was a brand name.
That's right. And that green tint was the chemical signature of its treatment.
CCA.
And CCA stands for
Chromated copper arsenate.
arsenate, as in arsenic.
As in arsenic, a potent insecticide to kill termites and ants. The chromium was chromate, or chromium-6, a bactericide, and the copper was a fungicide to stop rot. It was a chemical cocktail designed to make wood basically immortal when you put it in the ground.
And it worked. But it meant we were building our decks and our kids' playgrounds out of wood that was literally soaked in arsenic.
We were, and the source is very clear that this stuff doesn't just stay locked inside the wood forever.
It gets out. How?
It surfaces. The chemicals can leach out with rain, but they also just form a residue on the surface of the wood. The source says if you rub your hand across an older pressure-treated deck, you can physically pick up arsenic on your skin.
That's horrifying.
And it mentions some specific symptoms of chronic low-level exposure, like the development of corns or warts on the palms of the hands and the soles of the feet, and a darkening of the skin. But the disposal warning in the source was the part that really, really scared me.
This is absolutely critical for anyone listening who might be tearing down an old deck.
Yeah.
Do not burn this wood.
Never, ever.
Never. If you burn CCA-treated wood, the arsenic doesn't just disappear. It doesn't get destroyed. It concentrates in the ash.
And the statistic they gave was?
It's chilling. The source states that 1 single tablespoon of ash from a CCA fire contains a lethal dose of arsenic for an adult.
1 tablespoon. So if you're tearing down an old deck and you think, oh, I'll just have a bonfire with the scraps in the backyard.
You are creating a hazardous waste site in your fire pit. You're effectively creating a chemical weapon. It has to go to a proper landfill. You cannot mulch it for your garden, and you absolutely cannot burn it.
Okay. We have painted a fairly terrifying picture of the physical home. We're surrounded by poison plastic, we're breathing embalming fluid, and we're barbecuing next to arsenic.
It sounds bleak when you lay it all out like that, yeah.
But the source is called a guide. It's meant to offer solutions. And the big takeaway for me was that green building doesn't have to mean expensive.
That is the most persistent myth out there, that green is a synonym for luxury.
Right.
People think it means, importing bamboo from a specific forest in Asia or buying countertops made of recycled glass that cost $200 a square foot. But the source really focuses on what it calls the top 15 no or low-cost strategies.
And a lot of this is it's just basic physics. It's not fancy tech.
Passive solar is the best example of this. It costs $0 to orient a house correctly on its lot before you pour the foundation.
Explain how that works.
It's simple. The sun is lower in the sky in the winter and higher in the sky in the summer. So if you're in a cold climate, you face the long side of the house with most of the windows to the south. That way you capture all that free energy from the low-hanging winter sun to heat your home.
And then in the summer?
You use properly sized overhangs like eaves or awnings. They're designed to block the high summer sun from hitting the windows, which keeps the house cool. It's free heating and free air conditioning, basically.
It's ancient technology. It's just geometry.
It is. And then there are things like cool roofs. If you live in a hot climate like, say, Las Vegas, why would you ever put black asphalt shingles on your roof?
Black absorbs heat.
Massively. A white or light-colored roof reflects that solar energy back into space. The source says it can lead to a huge reduction in cooling costs. It's such a simple, common-sense choice.
I also love the sun pipe idea. That felt very clever.
Tubular skylights. They're fantastic. For rooms that don't have an exterior wall, like a bathroom or a hallway, you can install one of these. It's basically a highly reflective tube that channels sunlight from a small dome on the roof down through the attic and into the room.
So you get natural daylight without needing a giant skylight.
You get free light. You don't need to slip on a light bulb during the day.
Okay, but let's talk material swaps. Because sometimes you do have to buy something. If I'm doing a renovation and I know I shouldn't use PVC for my plumbing, what do I use instead?
The source suggests polyethylene, or PE. It's a different family of plastic.
And why is it better?
The key difference is it doesn't require all those additives. It's naturally more stable. It doesn't need the phthalate plasticizers to be flexible. And crucially, it doesn't contain the chlorine that creates the dioxin risk when it's made or burned. It's just a cleaner, simpler plastic.
And what about for flooring? If I want that resilient, easy-to-clean surface, but I don't want vinyl.
You go back to the original. You use real linoleum.
Now, I think for most people, linoleum and vinyl are the exact same thing. We use the words interchangeably.
They do, but they're chemical and philosophical opposites. Vinyl is synthetic petroleum chemistry, born in a lab. Real linoleum is a natural material.
What's it made of?
It sounds like a recipe from 100 years ago. It's made from oxidized linseed oil, wood flour, pine rosin, and it's all pressed onto a jute backing.
It sounds like a recipe for bread or something. It's all natural stuff.
It is. It's biodegradable. It's naturally antibacterial because of the linseed oil. It lasts for 40 or 50 years. It only fell out of favor because vinyl was cheaper to mass produce after World War II. But linoleum is a superior material in almost every way for human health.
But is it more expensive? That's always the question.
The initial sticker price might be a bit higher, yes. But this is where the expert in the source brings up a really important economic concept, the economy of scale.
Right. Explain that mechanism for us.
Every time a consumer walks into a store and says, no, I don't want the vinyl, I want the linoleum, they send a signal to the market.
A vote with your wallet.
A vote. I want this. As demand for the green material rises, manufacturers see that and they ramp up production. And as production scales up, the cost to produce each individual unit drops. It's basic economics.
So by choosing the green option, you're actually helping to drive the price down for the next person.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You are helping to move these healthier materials from being a gourmet or niche product to being just commonplace, the default option.
So we have agency. We can make these choices. We can choose the linoleum. We can choose the polyethylene. We can orient our windows. We can control, to some extent, the physical toxicity of our homes.
We can. We have a lot of power there.
But now I want to pivot, because that's only half the story we're telling today. I want to talk about the toxicity that we can't control with a trip to the hardware store, the financial toxicity.
Okay.
We're going to open our second source, the Las Vegas case study.
This is where the story shifts from, chemistry to economics. But that theme of invisible forces affecting our sanctuary,
Yeah.
it remains exactly the same.
To understand what happened, we have to go back in time. We have to go back to the scene of the crime, so to speak. Las Vegas,
Ooh.
the mid-2000s.
And Las Vegas wasn't just, a small part of the national housing bubble. It was the epicenter. It was the laboratory where the experiment went wildly, spectacularly out of control.
Let's just look at the numbers from the source, because they are. They're just staggering.
They are. So between 2003 and 2006, just 3 years, housing prices in Las Vegas rose 81%.
81%. So a house you bought for $200,000 was suddenly worth almost $365,000 3 years later.
It's the definition of irrational exuberance. And then, of course, gravity took over. The bubble burst. By 2009, prices had crashed roughly 60% from their peak.
A 60%.
Right. But the statistic from the report that really, really haunts me is the underwater rate.
Right. Explain what that looks like for a family.
By 2012, 59%. So nearly 6 out of every 10 of all mortgage properties in Nevada were underwater.
And being underwater means you owe the bank more money than the house is actually worth.
Right. So that $365,000 house is now worth $150,000, but you still have a $300,000 mortgage. You're trapped. You can't sell because you'd have to bring $150,000 in cash to the closing. You can't refinance. You're stuck.
And inevitably, a lot of people just couldn't pay. They walked away.
They had to. Foreclosures skyrocketed. The state's foreclosure rate was double the national average. The city was just littered with empty houses. And in a market economy, when you have that much distress and asset prices at rock bottom,
You ring the dinner bell for capital.
you ring the dinner bell, enter the investor.
And the scale of this influx is hard to overstate. The source actually tracks the spending.
It's a huge number. Between 2009 and 2012, investors spent approximately $25 billion acquiring single-family properties in Las Vegas alone.
$25 billion. Just buying up houses.
In that period, they accounted for roughly half of all single-family home sales and an incredible 2/3 of all condo purchases.
So stop and think about that. If you were a regular family trying to buy a home in Vegas in 2010, literally every other house you looked at was being snatched up, probably with cash, by an investor.
You weren't just competing with other families, you were swimming with sharks. And on top of all that, there was this looming threat that the market called shadow inventory.
That sounds ominous. What is that?
It is. Shadow inventory refers to all the houses that were already in default. The owners had stopped paying the mortgage, but the bank hadn't formally foreclosed and put the house on the market yet.
So they were in the pipeline.
Exactly. And the estimates in the report put this number as high as 75,000 properties in Vegas. It was this massive, terrifying wave of supply that everyone knew was waiting to crash onto the market, which kept prices even lower.
Now, when we say investor, I think the popular image that comes to mind is the giant corporation. Blackstone, Wall Street suits buying up whole neighborhoods.
And that's a bit of a myth that the source does a really good job of correcting. The big institutional players, they did eventually arrive on the scene. But in those early chaotic years, 2009, 2010, this was what the source calls a cottage industry.
So who were they, if not Blackstone?
They were smaller entities. The report lists actual LLC names from property records, names like Golden Sun Dynasty LLC or Integrity Wealth Building LLC. These were often just small groups of wealthy individuals, maybe a few doctors or lawyers, pooling their money.
And a lot of that money wasn't domestic, right?
No, that's a huge piece of the puzzle. The foreign factor was massive. The source notes that Las Vegas is a global brand. And I love the quote they use. It's, Las Vegas is a brand unlike Peoria.
That's true.
If you are a wealthy individual in Beijing or Taiwan or Moscow, you know what Las Vegas is. It has name recognition. You probably don't know the suburbs of Illinois.
So they weren't buying a neighborhood, they were buying the brand.
They bought the brand. And the motivation was often to create what the report calls a nest egg. If you live in a country with political instability or currency fluctuations, owning a tangible asset in the United States, a house in Vegas, is a hedge. It's like a safe deposit box made of stucco.
And there were other benefits for them too, right? There were visa strategies involved.
Yes, this was a big driver. The E2 and the EB5 visa programs. Essentially, if you invest a certain amount of capital in a U.S. commercial enterprise that creates jobs, you can get a visa or even a path to a green card.
And a portfolio of rental properties counts as a commercial enterprise.
It can, if it's structured correctly, and it employs people, like property managers. So for some of these international investors, buying a dozen rental homes wasn't just about the rent checks. It was about getting residency for their family in America.
This created a really weird situation where you had all these absentee owners who were literally thousands of miles away. How did that even work on a practical level?
Well, it birthed the whole new service industry. The source describes the sophisticated ecosystem of what it calls packagers.
Packagers.
These were local lawyers who specialized in setting up the LLCs for foreign investors. There were realtors who then doubled as property managers. There were home warranty companies that catered specifically to this market. They built a machine to serve as the absentee owner. You just send the wire transfer from overseas. They handle the leaky toilets and the tenant screenings.
I want to get into the mechanics of how they actually made money because the source breaks this down into two very distinct strategies over time. First, there was the flipper.
Right. Strategy A, the flipper. This was the dominant play right after the crash, from about 2008 to 2010, when prices were at their absolute bottom.
And the report calls them market edge flippers.
Yes, and it's an important distinction. The source says these weren't necessarily the predatory scammers you hear about. They were just really savvy operators who understood the distressed market system better than anyone else. They primarily bought REO properties.
REO meaning real estate owned by the banks. Foreclosures.
Exactly. And they took advantage of a tactic that desperate lenders were using called drop bidding.
Okay, can you explain how drop bidding works? It sounds fascinating.
It's a really interesting glimpse into how desperate the banks were. So a bank has a foreclosed house. They have to put it up for auction at the county trustee sale on the courthouse steps. Let's say the mortgage that was owed on the property was $200,000. The bank has to, by law, open the bidding there.
But the house is only worth $100,000 now in the crashed market.
Exactly. So nobody bids. The auctioneer calls out $200,000 and just crickets. So the bank, desperate to get this toxic asset off their books, would have their representative at the auction drop the bid. They would spontaneously lower the opening price, sometimes drastically, right there on the spot.
So if you're a flipper just standing there with a cashier's check in your pocket,
You could pounce. The average person can't do that. You need hundreds of thousands in liquid cash. You need to be physically present at the auctions every single day, and you need nerves of steel. The flippers had all three.
the source gives a great case study of an LLC called Clobear.
Clobear LLC is the perfect example of this flipper model in action. In one 6-month period, they bought 49 properties.
49 houses in 6 months.
They spent a total of $4.4 million. They did some light cosmetic work, paint, carpet, cleanup, and then they resold them. Their total sales came to $5.4 million.
That's $1 million profit in 6 months.
A clean million. It was roughly a 16% return on their investment. And the key to their model was speed. They sold most of those houses within 3 months of buying them. Buy low, sell slightly higher, do it fast, repeat.
But that strategy relies on being able to find those super cheap drop bid deals, and eventually those deals have to run out.
They did. As the market started to stabilize around 2011, the low-hanging fruit disappeared. The banks weren't as desperate. You couldn't flip as easily for a quick profit. So the smart money, the investors, they shifted to strategy B, the holder.
This is the buy and rent model, the landlord model.
Exactly. The math changed from being about capital gains to being about cash flow. And the source breaks down the yields, and they are eye-popping.
What did they look like?
So for a low-end home, maybe you purchase it for $60,000 cash. You can rent it out for $800 a month. After property taxes, insurance, and some maintenance costs, you were looking at a net return of nearly 10% annually.
In a world where interest rates on a savings account were near zero, 10% is incredible.
It's massive. It's a huge return. And interestingly, the report found that the low-end homes, the cheaper ones, actually offered better percentage returns than the nicer mid-range homes. The maintenance was a bit higher, but the initial purchase price was so low that the math worked out better in the investor's favor.
There was one specific holder model detailed in the source that I found incredibly complex and, frankly, brilliant. It's this company called 3JM LLC. It felt like financial engineering applied to a suburban ranch house.
3JM was a hybrid model, and it really shows you the level of sophistication these players had. It's wild. Here's how it worked.
Okay, walk me through it.
Step 1. 3JM would buy a distressed house at auction and fix it up. Standard stuff. Step 2. They would sell that renovated house to a Chinese investor.
Okay, so it's just a flip.
That's what it looks like, but here's the twist. As part of the sale, 3JM would immediately sign a contract to lease the house back from the new investor for a 3-year term.
Wait, wait. So 3JM, the company that just sold the house, becomes the tenant.
On paper, yes. In that lease agreement, 3JM guarantees the Chinese investor a flat, fixed return, let's say 5 or 6% a year. The investor gets a check wired to them every single month, guaranteed. They don't have to worry about vacancies or repairs or tenants.
And what does 3JM do?
3JM turns around and subleases the house to a real tenant, a family living in Vegas. They collect the actual market rent from that family. If the market rent is higher than the guaranteed payment they're sending to the investor, 3JM keeps the difference.
They captured the spread.
They capture the spread and they manage the property. It's brilliant. It effectively turned a single-family home into a financial bond for the foreign investor. The investor didn't care about the kitchen sink. They just cared about their guaranteed 6% coupon payment.
So we've established that this was an absolute gold rush for investors, but the deep dive question is always the same. So what? What was the impact? Was this good for Las Vegas? Did the investors save the neighborhood, or did they ruin it?
It's a really complex answer. And the source argues that you have to break it into 2 time periods. In the beginning, during the darkest days of 2008 and 2009, the investors were arguably the saviors of the market.
Saviors? How so?
Stabilization. You have to remember, after the crash, credit was completely frozen. Regular people, even with good jobs, could not get mortgages. Banks just weren't lending.
So families couldn't buy even if they wanted to.
Right. If the investors hadn't stepped in with their billions of dollars in cash to absorb that massive inventory of foreclosures, those houses would have just rotted.
They would have sat empty for years.
Empty, vandalized, stripped of copper wiring. The blight would have spread like a cancer, and property values for the remaining homeowners would have gone to zero. The investors put a floor under the market. They stopped the bleeding.
But there's always a but.
But then the medicine started to become the side effect. As the market recovered and prices started to tick up, the investors didn't leave. They kept buying. And they started crowding out the regular home buyers who were trying to get back into the market.
This is the cash king advantage you mentioned.
Exactly. I want you to imagine you're a bank trying to sell a foreclosure. You have 2 offers on your desk. Offer A is from the Smith family. They want to live there. They're offering $150,000.
Okay.
But they need a mortgage, which takes time. They need an inspection. They need an appraisal. They need 45 days to close. And if that appraisal comes in low, the whole deal could die.
A lot of risk for the bank.
A lot of risk and a lot of hassle. Now, offer B is from Golden Sun LLC. They're offering $145,000 less. But it's all cash. No inspection. No appraisal. They can close in 7 days. They'll buy it as is.
You take offer B.
You take offer B every single time. As a seller, the certainty of a quick cash closing almost always trumps a slightly higher but riskier offer. The source notes that even government programs designed to help families, like Fannie Mae's First Look program that gave them a head start, they largely failed to stop this dynamic. The cash advantage is just too powerful.
And the consequence of this is a fundamental change in the very fabric of who lives in the neighborhood.
A huge change. The study found that homeownership rates in the areas they looked at declined significantly over this period. And the researchers also noted what they call a maintenance gap.
The maintenance gap.
They performed a windshield survey, which is pretty much what it sounds like. They literally drove around and scored the condition of thousands of homes from their car.
What were they looking for?
Curb appeal, basically. Are the weeds high? Is the paint peeling? Is there junk in the yard? And what they found was a small but statistically significant difference.
What was it?
Absentee-owned investor homes scored slightly lower on average for curb appeal and maintenance than the owner-occupied homes right next door. It wasn't a disaster. The report is clear these weren't slumlords letting the places fall apart, but there was a visible difference. The weeds are just a little higher, the paint was a little older.
It creates a kind of fraying effect on the neighborhood.
It does. A neighborhood that's 40 or 50% short-term renters just feels different than a neighborhood of long-term owners. There's less social capital. People don't invest in the community, in the schools, in the same way.
And the source mentioned that condos were kind of the canary in the coal mine for this.
Condos were the weak link in the chain, for sure. Investors bought them for incredibly cheap prices. The median price was just $42,000. But condos have high HOA fees, and those mandatory monthly fees eat directly into the profit margin for a landlord.
So they have less incentive to keep them up.
Exactly. The source suggests that as the math gets tighter, condos are the first properties where investors might stop doing non-essential maintenance. They're the most vulnerable part of the rental market to becoming blighted over the long term.
So let's try to bring these two deep dives together now. We've looked at the physical toxicity inside the walls and then this financial complexity that's controlling the walls. What's the connection?
I think it really highlights the dual nature of the home. On one hand, it's a biological shell that needs to be materially healthy for the humans living inside it. But on the other hand, it has been completely financialized. It's an asset class, just like a stock or a bond. It's been securitized and globalized.
And it seems like there's a tension in both stories between what's efficient and what's healthy.
That is the perfect connecting thread. In the physical home, we use PVC because it is efficient and cheap for the builder, even though it carries a long-term toxic cost for the resident and the planet.
And in the financial home.
In the financial home, the market favors the cash investor because they are efficient and fast for the seller, even though it carries a long-term social cost for the community by reducing homeownership.
In both cases, we prioritize the efficiency of the transaction over the long-term health of the inhabitant.
Precisely. That's it in a nutshell.
So what does this mean for you, the listener? What's the actionable advice here, if there is any?
Well, on the physical side, the good news is you have agency. You can make choices.
Yeah.
If you're building or renovating, you can ask for the polyethylene pipe. You can verify the wood you're buying isn't treated with the new generation of chemicals. You can promise yourself you will not burn that old deck.
You can choose the linoleum.
You can choose a linoleum. You can design your home to face the sun. You have the power to refuse to bring formaldehyde-laden furniture into your nursery. You can control that environment.
And on the financial side, it feels a lot harder to control.
It is. So there, I think it's more about awareness. You just need to understand that your neighborhood is now part of a global asset class. That house next door that just sold with the cash offer. Your new neighbor might not be a person. It might be an LLC managed by a local lawyer for a family in Chengdu.
And that changes the whole dynamic of a community.
It changes who you borrow a cup of sugar from. Or rather, it might mean there's literally no one home to borrow sugar from.
I want to leave our listeners with a final thought to mull over, one that connects these two sources. We spend so much time and energy worrying about the toxicity of the paint on the walls, and as we learned today, we absolutely should be worried about that. But perhaps we should be equally concerned about the toxicity of a housing market that has come to prioritize efficient transactions for global investors over the ability of a local family to simply buy a home and put down roots.
It raises a very provocative question, doesn't it? Is the future of the American dream a safe, non-toxic, green rental?
That is a big question. And a good place to leave it for today. Thank you for walking us through the walls.
Always a pleasure to dig into the details.
Check your labels, check your deeds, and stay curious. We'll see you next time on The Deep Dive.